VDL Group consists of 94 companies spread across 20 countries with a turnover of 3.6 billion euros. VDL, Enabling Transport Solutions, is one of their companies aiming to develop environmentally friendly, innovative hardware and software solutions in the area of electric transport, e-mobility, battery technology, charging infrastructure, energy storage, automated guided vehicles, AGVs, guidance and navigation technology.
Okay, I think in general we are looking at pollution, air pollution mostly, but also sound pollution. And there is a generic direction for all vehicles to be replaced by vehicles with an electric driveline. And within VDL we have a large group that is supplying buses and coaches to the market that go into cities, and cities are the first target for governments to really get them into emission-free zones. Since that business is quite important to VDL, we have decided early on to start electrifying vehicles and making sure that we are one of the front runners in implementing emission-free buses, but also smaller vehicles and later on also trucks. So we made a start with it, and we believe it's important for the continuation of our business, first and foremost. And next we can also basically contribute to a cleaner environment with cleaner and more silent vehicles. Yeah, so we started quite early on by not modifying the complete vehicle. So we started off with a vehicle with a combustion engine and then modified that vehicle to support an electric driveline, batteries, and the whole electric infrastructure that goes with that vehicle in order to make it run. So we started off with something that was pretty well known. We took some of the unknowns out of new technology and implemented that into the new vehicle. And that made us start from a known basis and gradually change the components as we were learning more in this whole environment together with our customers. Eventually we're going to come up with like the ideal electric vehicle, but right now it's starting from a known basis, introducing some of the unknown to new technology into that vehicle and making that work first, and making sure that all the little child diseases and anything else that comes with introducing new technology we can cope with in a good way. Yeah, so when it comes to manufacturing, we basically have to train our people to deal with high voltage electronics. So it's not so much how you build or manufacture the vehicle, because there's still an engine inside, but it's now an electrical engine instead of a combustion engine. There are batteries in place now which weigh quite a lot compared to, for instance, a diesel tank. When it's empty, it doesn't weigh a lot. So in that whole manufacturing process, we built the vehicle as we were building a diesel vehicle. And only at the end, we are adding the electrical components to it, done by specialists, also in a very specialistic area. So those people are trained to deal with high voltage electronics, and they know how to deal with big heavy items with a potential danger like batteries. So lithium-ion is quite a broad technology as such. So it's a chemistry that's inside batteries. And there's several variants of lithium-ion batteries. So there's the iron phosphate batteries, which are somewhat lighter but cannot be charged as fast. And there's variants like NMC or titanium oxide batteries that are much heavier, that can charge much faster, but at the same time are also more expensive. So we have to continuously find the right balance between battery density, energy density, cost, volume, weight, life cycles, etc. So it's a multi-dimensional choice that we continuously make. And lithium ion compared to lead acid, lead acid is what you typically have in your car batteries when you start it, is not an energy carrier for a long time. So your phone, for instance, also has a form of lithium ion batteries inside. That's typically what we use. They cycle quite a lot, so you can recharge and charge them time over time. So they typically last quite a long time. And it's a pretty well-known technology as such. Yeah, so if you really look at the cost of a vehicle, then a large portion of cost is still determined by the amount of batteries that are sitting inside. We have made a very deliberate choice on the way a vehicle is being used to put a relatively small amount of batteries inside. Why? Because they weigh quite a lot, and every weight that you add to the vehicle, you cannot add passengers to a bus. And with a bus, the main purpose is still to carry people and not batteries. So there we make a choice to not to put too many batteries in there, and that also then limits the cost. If you look in general to the cost of an electric vehicle, then of course the body and the chassis of a vehicle is very much the same as a combustion engine, and it's mostly the electrical components that are due to scale and due to also the maturity of technology that can still come down in price substantially, I would say. But it's mostly the batteries, really, if I look at the pricing of a vehicle. Yeah, this is quite a common situation today, because if you look in most of the cities today, then there's large fleets of diesel buses driving around. And typically what happens with those vehicles is they're being refueled once or twice per day. They continue their runs for a full day. And when they come back to the depot or the filling station, they're filled up with diesel again and made ready for the next day. What we typically do is we look at the routes that are being driven by those vehicles, by those buses. We look at average speed, we look at number of stops, we look at what is called dead time, which is typically the time at the end of a line when a bus driver has to stop and has to make up for his schedule, or he has a scheduled break. Those are the moments that you can use for an electric vehicle to charge. So there's two basic choices. One choice is you put a lot of batteries in your vehicle and you operate them as diesel buses. This is typically what we don't do, because then the amount of passengers you can carry is less. So we make it a smaller number of batteries in that vehicle, and we charge multiple times per day. So we analyze the routes, we analyze the requirements, also the number of passengers that need to be carried on the route. And on basis of that, we estimate how much charging points are needed and where those charging points should be. And at the same time also how much energy is then required in order to basically fuel the charging infrastructure. Once we've done that, we calculate the number of vehicles that a typical operator needs in order to operate his fleet. So in your case, a city needs a number of vehicles, and maybe there's a couple of spare vehicles in that fleet that are available as technical reserve. So for instance, a vehicle breaks down or needs service or maintenance, or in some cases it has a crash, which unfortunately also happens with buses. We calculate the number of vehicles, and with that we then have a total system which we then offer to the city or to the bus operator. And that consists of buses, chargers, and an advice on how they can deal also with the amount of energy that is required in order to operate that whole fleet. So it's not just simple, here's an option list, tick the number of options, tick the number of vehicles, and then we deliver them. That would be nice, but there's more to it. There's a total system that needs to become in operation, and that is then the whole story, where we do a lot of advisory work. And at the end of the day, it also allows us to grow to new business models. So right now we sell vehicles, but we could also think about models where we lease vehicles for X amount of euros per kilometer. because that would then also be off balance, and from a business case perspective, that might be an interesting option also for cities. There's a lot of trade-offs that need to be made. There's a trade-off that needs to be made in the number of chargers, where those chargers need to be put. Are they end of line? Are they charged in line? So do they need on the route somewhere additional charging points that need to be made? How is night charging being done? And then there's also the question on the connector. So typically, if you charge a vehicle, then somehow you need to make a connection to that charger. There's several ways of doing that. One is from the bus up, there can be a pantograph, like a train situation, which hits a certain contact hood. That is a way of transferring energy. There's also one which is called inverted pantograph. That is basically coming from the charging pole down onto the vehicle. So there's a number of bars on the vehicle that connect electrically to the charging pole that comes down. And of course, there's a normal connector. Connectors are limited in charging current, charging power, and can also be troublesome, especially if you have a depot full of buses. Imagine 100 vehicles being put there for parking in a depot, and they all have connectors to it. When the buses leave, the connectors are dangling there somewhere or on the floor. People drive over them with their wheels. So we typically choose a solution right now where the pantograph is on the bus and goes up, like on a train. That is a safe connection, and we can charge with charging powers up to 450 kilowatt, which is pretty significant, because then within 20 minutes the vehicle is completely recharged again, which makes the operation almost like a diesel fleet. Yeah, so we believe for sure that the driveline of the future will be electric. So the engine that is currently a combustion engine will be replaced by something that electrically drives the wheels. Then the next question is, how do you get the energy into the engine or into the e-motor? That can be done through batteries, that can be done through a fuel cell, hydrogen. And hydrogen is also available in several formats. So typically what you see with hydrogen filling stations is that at high pressure, like 350 or 700 bars, hydrogen is pumped into special tanks, which is quite a disadvantage because it's high pressure. It's not unsafe necessarily, but what you need special equipment in order to build up that pressure. One of the things that we started to investigate with a startup that came out of a technical university is they found a way of storing hydrogen into an acid fluid called formic acid. It's a chemical composition which, when it reacts with a special catalyst, it separates in H2 and CO2. So you basically get hydrogen out of it and you get CO2. CO2 is first caught to create the acid, so it's only temporarily there as a binding aid, and it's released the moment hydrogen is being produced inside the vehicle. So it's quite a nice way of refueling in a more natural way, like you would do with diesel, a fluid that decomposes into the vehicle as hydrogen and CO2. It's still at early stages of maturity, so hydrogen as such is already there for a long time, but there it's a chicken and egg story about the fueling station and about the vehicles. Formic acid might be one of the ways to tank a fluid that gives a totally clean fuel for the future. But nevertheless, and regardless of where the energy comes from, the driveline of that vehicle will be electric, and that's you will also see with passenger cars. Plenty. If I start with technical challenges, then the technical challenges are basically to make sure that we move with the technology. Vehicles as such don't develop a lot, but there's continuous development on motors, there's continuous development on battery technology or energy storage technology. We need to make the vehicle so flexible that we can adapt to those future ongoing changes and developments without completely turning upside down the architecture or the infrastructure inside the vehicle. Secondly, we are being confronted with higher and higher charging currents that you also need to conduct somehow into the vehicle. So the the copper wires that conduct the energy inside the vehicle get larger in diameter and therewith also more difficult to put inside or on top of the vehicle. So from a technical perspective, there's a lot of challenges. Second part is probably also organizational, but has to do with those technical challenges as well, is that the amount of software inside the vehicle is growing exponentially. So previously, a combustion engine had its own ECU that controlled the way at which combustion takes place. With an electric vehicle, there's continuous communication between various computers inside the vehicle. So that means that the dashboard now suddenly is a display. So graphics come onto that. The vehicle is continuously connected to the outside world, which brings another software challenge. There is all kinds of safety and energy regeneration algorithm inside the vehicle. It may adapt to its environment. Autonomous features come into play. So the amount of software and the engineers we need in order to make that software happen and do the system integration inside that vehicle is certainly one of the organizational challenges I face. Getting enough people in an environment, especially where we are in the southern part of the Netherlands, we have a lot of competition from other technology companies, such as ASML, but also Philips and NXP, and a couple of other companies that are over there. So the war on talent definitely is on. We're playing a good part of it, but organizationally and also technically, I think these are the challenges that we face. Then if I look at the economical side of things, then there is the challenge of price. An electric vehicle is much more expensive than a typical combustion or a traditional vehicle. And the payback only comes if you use it a lot. So only over time you will earn back your money that is offsetting the higher purchasing price of a vehicle. So energy is cheaper, so the more kilometers you drive that vehicle, the faster you earn back basically the investment into that vehicle. I think that is probably a subset of some of the challenges we face. Not all of it, but I hope it gives you an indication. Now, I think for us, we need to be on the forefront of technology, so continuously keep on innovating. The moment we stop innovating, then we start to lose also against our competition. The second part is that we have to deal with competition. There's especially the larger vehicle manufacturers that are somewhat slower at the start, so they don't necessarily make the quick inroads into the market, but they will catch up, and then it comes at such a violence that it's unstoppable. So for us, it's running ahead, continuously innovating, and making sure that we're ahead of the pack.
Tank cars are yesterday. Automatic vehicles that transport a new type of tank container are the future. A blue frame is located between the AGV and the container. The AGV moves under the frame and lifts the container. A crane then lifts the tank container onto the support frame. In teleoperated mode, the AGV can travel up to 30 kilometers per hour. In fully automatic mode with sensor guiding, it moves a little faster than walking pace. It can carry either two standard 26-foot tank containers or one of the new type of BASF class tank containers weighing up to 75 tons. For the first time ever, a driverless vehicle shares the road with other users, with pedestrians, cyclists, cars, buses, and trucks.